Welcome to the Pelle, Neroth, Taylor and Martin Sieff show, Capitals Uncovered, where we cover geopolitics and much else, actually. I mean, anything that interests us, and we're hoping that the viewer will be interested as well. We've got Ingrid Carlqvist, who's with us today, one of Sweden's most well-known figures in the kind of alternative media populist sphere. Very, very early to sort of speak up against, the elite immigration project, and became notorious in some circles for that. She used to work for the big tabloid papers, a very well-known journalist inside the mainstream media, and then she branched out on her own, and she now runs a podcast called Ingrid och Maria in Swedish. I'll put the links down below for those of you who speak Swedish. It's one of the best podcasts in Sweden, and they follow much of the things that we follow, and never taking the mainstream media at their word for anything. But Ingrid, you've just now written a book which is coming out in September. We're going to talk in the second half. We're going to talk a little bit about the Swedish election. You're much more optimistic than I was yesterday about the achievements of the Swedish government, the right-wing Swedish government, and you're very worried that the left-wing government will be voted back in and undo all those achievements. But our viewers who know Britain and know that reform are fighting, or actually looking for ideas, what they can learn from Sweden and the obstacles that they've overcome and the problems that they still face, that might be quite useful for a British audience. But with first half of the show, we're going to talk about your conversion to Christianity, which your memoir is about. And it's got the best title in the world. What is that title, Ingrid?
In Swedish, I will say it in Swedish first, is Men herregud, finns du på riktigt? And hopefully it will be translated into English. And then I think the title will be, Oh my God, are you for real? Because that's exactly what happened to me. Sweden is maybe the most secular country in the world, and it's all because of the Social Democrats, because they decided 100 years ago that they should bring Christianity out of society. And they started to talk about, well, religion is a private thing. You don't have to talk about it. And I grew up in a very atheistic family. Only my grandmother on my mother's side was a Christian. And my dad, who was an engineer, he always said, well, I love grandmother, but, this thing about God and Jesus, she doesn't know about that. That's totally wrong. And I really loved my dad, and I wanted to be like him, and I wanted to believe in science and facts. But I really listened to my grandmother. She told me all the stories from the Bible and about Jesus and so on. And when I went my first 3 years in school, we actually had Christianity on the schedule. And then they decided no more Christian lecturing in Swedish schools. From now on, it's only religion. And we know that the one religion they talk least about is Christianity. It's just Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam. So, but I early understood, I think maybe 20, 30 years ago, I understood that a lot of the problems we had in Sweden was because that we had lost God. So I was an atheist who was very friendly to Christianity, and I really wanted there to be a revival in Sweden because I saw so many unhappy persons. They didn't think their life had any meaning. I've always known my life has meaning, so I thought that other people could become Christians, but I am quite okay as I am. And then, things happened all the time. Suddenly I was writing books, and I suddenly got a voice in my head what the title should be for that book. And I thought, well, you're really clever, Ingrid. Now I know it wasn't me. It was God talking to me. And 10 years ago, we had an archbishop in Sweden, a woman named Antje Jackelén. And she had said in various interviews that we all believe in the same God, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And there are many ways to God, she said. And I was so upset, so I emailed her, or her press secretary, and I said, I'd really like you to answer this question. You say that we believe in the same God and there are many ways to God, but do you really, this is a theological question to you as an archbishop, do you really mean that first God sent his only son to us to die on the cross for our sins, and then 600 years later, God changed his mind and told Muhammad to go kill off all the Christians? Do you think I got an answer from her?
No.
No.
I think surely she tried to throw you in a dungeon, or you had to flee Sweden for your life.
No, she just refused to answer the question. And of course, I know why she did that. Because as an atheist, I know what Jesus said. I already knew that there is only I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through me. So either she had to lie and say something that that's not in the Bible or whatever, or she would have to admit that she had been lying, because there is only one way to God. If you don't believe that, you are not a Christian, and you should definitely not be the Archbishop of the Church of Sweden. She's out now, but they have been like that, more or less all of them, the last 20, 30 years.
What? So your what? I mean, what is the story arc of this memoir? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, what happened was that I got a new friend called Henrik, and he had become a Christian a few years before we met, and it was because he had some bleeding in his brain, and he wasn't a Christian, but he had Christian friends, and they prayed for him. And the next day he was at a hospital in London, actually, and the next day the doctors came and said, we don't know what happened here, but your brain is totally perfect now. There is nothing on the X-ray. So he became a Christian, and he said to me, Ingrid, you got to become a Christian. Don't you know that is the truth, and that is you always want the truth? And I said, well, Henrik, I think I would like to become a Christian, but how do you do that? You can't just wake up one morning and decide that, okay, now I'm going to believe in God. And then, things happened, and I met this Swedish Bible teacher, Lars Enarson, that's been living. He has been living in Israel for 30 years or something like that. And we met and we talked, and we had a lot of things to talk about. And then he said to me, but Ingrid, are you a Christian? And I said, I think I'm a hobby Christian. And he said, what's that? I don't know. I just mean that I would like to become Christian, but I don't know. Something must happen so I can realize you say it's true. I want to believe that. And then he said, come to Israel. And I said, yeah, I don't have the money for that. And then 3 days later, he sent me an email. Ingrid, my wife and I want to invite you. We will pay the flight and the B&B to stay. And I was like, oh, is this really happening? This is so fantastic. And I came down there and we walked around in Jerusalem, and I asked him all these atheist questions. He was talking about, you see here, Ingrid, this was where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. And I said, no, that's a horrible story. It must be the most horrible story in the Bible. I hadn't read the Bible, but I remembered that story. And I said, why would God be so mean that he told Abraham to kill his only son? And then Lars looked at me and he said, Ingrid, God never meant for Abraham to kill Isaac. He was just testing how much Abraham trusted God. And I put a lot of those questions, and I could almost feel the atheism leaving my body and my brain. And then came the day when I and another woman, Lars' sister, actually. She was also down there with me. And we went to Galilee. And we went to many places. And the last thing we were going to do that day was to take a boat trip on the Sea of Galilee. And when we came there, we know that there was some Daniel, his boat was the one we were going to. And they said, yeah, he's out, just stay here, he will come. And then the other woman, she took up her Bible and she started reading for me. And then I suddenly saw a lot of people going on a boat. And I said, Ellen, this must be our boat, let's go on board. And we got on board and they just left. And I said to Ellen, why aren't they coming and selling tickets to us? Do you think we are on the wrong boat? And then suddenly, the other people, they were actually, I found out later, they were Christians from Minnesota, the Swedish state in the US. That was the first sign. And they started singing. And I said, Ellen, we're on the wrong boat. We haven't paid any tickets. What are we going to do? And she said, okay, now we're here. Just enjoy. And she knew all the songs because she is a Christian. So she sang with them. And then their pastor was starting to talk to us about when Jesus was coming, walking on the water. And Peter said, wow, now I really understand. You are the Son of God. You're walking on water. Can I do that too? And Jesus said, yeah, come on. And Peter started to walk until he lost faith. And he fell down, and Jesus had to bring him up. And then this pastor said, and then Jesus said, why do you have so little faith, Peter? And then something just happened in my heart. It was like, boom. And I thought, what's wrong with you, Ingrid? Why do you think that everybody else could become a Christian, but not you? Why do you have so little faith? And I started crying, and I took a selfie, and I sent it to my friend Maria. And she immediately said, have you been saved, Ingrid? Yeah. And I cried, and it was so wonderful. And then when we came back with the boat, I still had a bad conscience because I hadn't paid a ticket. So I went up to this American pastor and I said, hello, my name is Ingrid. I'm from Sweden, and I'm so sorry. I got on the wrong boat. And he looked at me and said, no, Ingrid, you were definitely on the right boat, because he had actually seen what happened to me. So that's the story of how I became a Christian. But then when I came home, I was like, I bought the Bible and I said, how can I do this? How do you read that? It's 2,000 pages. And where do you start? Do you start from the beginning and just read? How do you do it? So the Bible was on my table for like 2 years. And then one morning I just woke up and I said, I want to go to Bible school. And I called my friend Henrik, the one who had become Christian before me. And he said, it's funny you say that, because the new church that I've started going to, they actually have a Bible school every other Saturday. So it's perfect for us. So I started there, and then I got a little pamphlet, how to read the Bible in a year. And so now I'm reading it for the third time, and it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And then to just wrap it up, when I was driving my car to my baptism 3 years ago, I suddenly heard a voice in my head said, Ingrid, you're going to write a book about your story, how you came to faith. And it should be called, Oh My God, Are You For Real? So God gave me the title, but it took me 3 years because I had to read the Bible. I had to think about many things, but God led me through the writing. And now I think it's a really, really both funny and hopeful and interesting book, because I know there are so many Swedes. Swedes are searching for something. They go out in the forest and and they do tarot cards and everything and crystals, and so and the answer is so simple. It's Jesus. There it is. You don't have to search anymore. So I really hope that this book could be, if many people who are searching for something, but they have been told all their life that God is just a fairy tale. There is no God. Of course, there is not. You are a rational person. Don't believe in stories like that. I really hope that I can give a lot of people hope, and maybe they can come to Jesus too.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'll just lead with a few questions and I'll hand over to Martin. Maybe we'll have the immigration debate on the next episode.
I think that's a better idea. Yeah, absolutely.
But I was going to say, well, first thing, did you feel that you were a different person? I mean, when you were saved or whatever, was it like a flash of lightning? Did you feel elevated afterwards? Were you on a kind of permanent high, or what was the feeling?
The feeling was, I have always known that there is a meaning with my life. I've always known that I have to fight for the truth, even though people have been so horrible to me, calling me a racist, an Islamophobe, a Nazi, even. I was just shunned out of polite society when I started talking about immigration and Islam. I actually read the Quran before I read the Bible because I understood that this is a threat to us. And so what happened was that I had this feeling of love, that whatever happens, Ingrid, from now on, you will never be alone. Jesus will always be on your side. You can talk to him. You can ask him for things. That was, what I initially felt. And now I do talk to Jesus all day long.
Yeah.
I often say that Christianity is not a religion, it's a relation. It's about having a relation with God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And that is really great. But I also write in my book, is it possible that a person can walk around her whole life, almost whole life, thinking that she's an atheist, but actually she has been, conducting herself as a Christian all her life? So sometimes I say, I think I've always been a Christian. I just didn't want to accept it because it was for stupid people.
Okay, I'll just ask one final question and hand over to Martin. There's so many I could ask you, but time's short. Okay, I mean, you're known as an immigration critic and an Islam critic. We'll focus on the immigration because that's the weaker claim, as it were, because, wouldn't some people say Jesus will, I mean, some people on the left, Christianity, people like Ulf Bjereld, Martin won't know who that is, say, well, Christianity is all about open borders. It's about love. It's about letting everyone into the country. And I was just, you and I remember the propaganda from 2015, where these people arriving on the shores of the Greek islands, they looked like figures from the Bible, didn't they? And I'm sure that was deliberate propaganda against us Europeans, because they were handsome young men. They could be disciples. They were Middle Eastern, but they had beards. They had chiseled faces, and they were kind of wearing these kinds of clothes. You thought, well, are they hearkening back? Are they trying to appeal to our race historical memory of Christianity? So anyway, how can you combine immigration criticism with Christianity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are so many places in the Bible where God talks about nations. And it's not a good thing to bring your own country down just because you want to show suicidal empathy, as Gad Sad calls it, to other people. No, that's not what God had a plan with putting different people in different nations. I don't think at all that God likes what the West is doing. And the West is doing it because we have lost Christianity. We don't see the threats from Islam. Exactly. We are saying, oh, we got to be nice. I mean, they can build mosques here. We cannot build churches in their country, but we must show that we are better than them. And the only result we will have from this is that they will take democracy and Christianity and freedom of religion and all those things away from us.
Well, I mean, immigration is in a way a substitute religion. People looking for something and assuming that, letting unlimited numbers of people is the way it gives them meaning in their lives, and Christianity will give them something else. Martin, you grew up in Northern Ireland, and as you said, your sectarian divide went right through your parents' bedroom bed, because one was Catholic and the other one was Protestant, right? And you've lived with this divide all your life, and you've thought a lot about these things. What can you say to Ingrid's conversion and her experiences?
Well, first of all, with my parents, now it wasn't a Protestant Christian, it wasn't a Protestant Catholic divide that divided. It was a political, cultural one. But of course, it basically comes down along those lines, because my dad, although he had very close friends in the Northern Irish Protestant-dominated police force, but he was all his life, and he never hid it. He couldn't hide it. Very strong Southern accent, was a product of Eamon de Valera's Ireland. He was steeped in the culture and life of it. Whereas my mum and her sisters, though they were all born in Dublin, the family came up to Belfast during World War I when they were virtually babies or just very young children. And they were married. They were proud subjects of the king and later of the Queen, of Queen Elizabeth, and very proud of it. So that was their defining division. But in my own case, I was a bright boy. My father made sure I went to one of the very best Protestant schools in Northern Ireland, because he didn't want me to be an outsider in the society the way he had been. He wanted me to have every opportunity possible. And it was a very wise and courageous and self-sacrificing move by him. And I give thanks for it every day of my life because of what it led to. Because it was a marvelous school, but it was from the other side of the sectarian divide. And here was this paranoia towards Catholic Christianity, and especially as defined in the Republic of Ireland, which was a deeply Catholic society in those days. And if you were outside it, it wasn't, of course, remotely 16th or 17th century Inquisition or anything like that. It was a very tolerant society, but it was tolerant in a modern sense. On the surface, everything was very traditional until the late 1970s. And there was only one television channel, RTE, Radio Televiseren. And every night when it closed only at 10:30 or 11 p.m. It wasn't allowed to be open later. And it closed with the Angelus. It closed with traditional Catholic prayers and liturgy on national television every night. But then it changed in the late 70s and 80s. And at first, the change seemed to be gentle. And it was classic liberalism. At first, the changes were humane and welcome. And I still welcome to this day. And Ireland did become a much more tolerant society. And a lot of excesses which exist in any society were rightly exposed. And this was welcome. But of course, it didn't stop there. There was I watch a lot of popular drives my wife crazy, of course, lowest common denominator cable television shows. And there is one show on one of our streaming channels now called Dublin Narcos, about the history of narcotics crime in Ireland and from the 1950s and 60s on to the present. And when I grew up in Ireland, drunkenness alcohol was a national drug. And of course, there was vast excesses of it everywhere, as there still is. We are Irish. But drug addiction was virtually unknown. And then hardline drug addiction, heroin and stuff like that, and later cocaine, really comes streaming into Ireland in the 1970s. Late 1970s. And on this show, which is just about Dublin cops, it's a popular show, that they're not allowed to do serious historical or sociological analysis. They're not theologians. They're not trying to make a moral point. They're not preaching Christianity. But they have people talking from those days. What do they say? Well, everybody was losing faith in the church, weren't they? And there was a vacuum, wasn't there? So people had to go for somewhere. And that's exactly what happened. And I realized this had happened in front of my eyes. I've been in this process. But you don't put two and two together. The elephant is in front of you. And at one minute, you feel the stink from behind the bottom of the elephant when you're by the tail. Another time, you feel the breath of the elephant because you're in the front of the trunk. And you don't think it's part of the same process. You don't think it's part of the same animal, but it's all the same elephant. It's all part of the same process. And what had happened in Ireland, of course, was religion was discredited. It fell apart for a whole variety of reasons, both deliberate and subconscious. All these massive forces taking place, as throughout the Western world. And Ireland was one of the last places it happened in. But it happened in an enormous way. And what was that? Was it a better society afterwards? No, it was not. And there was something else. And I'd like you to address this too, because I think you already have, Ingrid. It sounds to me you had the same process exactly in Sweden. Being in Northern Ireland, the South also, you're also part of Britain. You're part of British culture in the widest sense. You get the same TV, you read the same newspapers, you're part of the same general experience. And I was born in 1950, and I grew up at the end of a 50 or 60-year period in Britain, and you're familiar with it, of course, Pelle, which you can call New Jerusalem. The name is interesting. It was the rise of the Labour Party movement. And the Labour Party movement, which quite the Liberal Party, was very Christian in its origins. And it grew out of not the Church of England, but the nonconformist faiths, the kind of faiths I think you also have in Sweden too. Initially, taking the Bible seriously, very moral, very idealistic, but also the social gospel that Christianity must apply to raise not just the living standards, but the ethical standards and the standards of survival for children. Giving children enough food to eat so they don't die of malnutrition or disease is a Christian value. Of course, it is. But what happened in this movement in politics in Britain in the early 20th century was that as part of other things, Darwinism, skepticism towards the Bible, biblical criticism, so many different developments in science, changing the way we looked at the world. Liberals and moderate socialists turned away from Christianity. They turned away from the Bible. They turned away from the faith. And as a result, but they kept they thought they were keeping the same moral values, but they were divorced from the biblical underpinnings. And one of
Martin, sorry, we've got 5 minutes left.
Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah. But I looked around at the society that New Jerusalem built, that I grew up in the 1960s and 70s, and you know it well, Pelle, and I think you have it in Sweden as well, Ingrid. High-rise apartment buildings where people live in tiny little apartments where they don't have gardens, where they don't have simple streets you can go into, where you only walk out into hellish long walkways. The vision of Le Corbusier. And it's a dehumanized vision. It's human beings reduced to being cells, atomized. Yeah. It's people broken from their families. It's weakening of the family bonds. It's so many therapists who specialize in encouraging wives to break away from their husbands, or husbands to express themselves and break away and leave their families. It's smashing the family bond, and it's smashing the social bond. And what do you get? You get drug addiction, you get gangs, you get mass rape. This is New Jerusalem. Have you had that in Sweden as well? When you have social morality divorced from the Bible, divorced from
well,
God,
in a way,
I
think as the social democracy was atheistic for a century. Well, we got
exactly
4 minutes left. Ingrid, tell your response to what Martin's saying.
I think you're absolutely right. That has happened all over the West. And the Social Democrats in Sweden, they were a lot smarter than the communists in the Soviet Union, because the communists they banned the church. So they went underground, and when something is forbidden and it's underground, it just makes people more Christian,
Yes,
more
yes,
more
yes.
they want to beat the system. But in Sweden, the Social Democrats did it over 100-year period, and instead of banning the church, they took over the church. The Church of Sweden is not really led by the Archbishop and the other bishop. It's led by politicians from
Yes.
political parties. And the Social Democrats, being the biggest party still in Sweden, they have now there is a new motion. They have already said many years ago that we will have gay marriages, but up until now, the priests could decide for themselves if they wanted, because it is actually against the Bible. It's one of the holiest things in the Bible that marriage is between a man and a wife, so that they can procreate and build families. That's the whole point of it. And now there is a motion that maybe they will take this on the next church meeting, that all the new priests have to say, okay, I will marry gay people. Otherwise, they will not get a job as a priest.
I've got to wind up there, and that'll lead us into the next show, I hope. Maybe you can come on just before the election or something, because I was writing a pamphlet about Swedish immigration, and Elon Musk's right. I mean, we're losing Europeans are not repopulating themselves. The birth rate is 1.42 in Sweden, and you just have to go down to the street, don't you?